Christiane, can you hear me?
Do you expect people to come on and off because it's a 3-hour meeting?
That was sort of the thinking, that folks could join into the topic areas that they were most interested in. Because we thought that it was a long time to ask people to participate in a Zoom meeting, even for 2 hours. So that's a lot of Zooming.
Leslie, can you hear
especially
me?
at
Yep.
night.
Leslie,
So that's what.
okay? I'm not getting any confirmation. I know you guys can, but Leslie, can you hear me?
Hi, whoever just connected by iPhone, can you hear us?
Yeah, we need to know if you can hear the mayor speaking.
Leslie, can you hear me? She's got something muted that's stopping us from. Hello?
Joe or Christiane, do you have the mayor muted? So we need to unmute the mayor.
I think they have Casa Grande muted, which is, I think, are these microphones.
Okay. I'm going to try to unmute you, Mayor.
Unmute one of those Casa Grandes.
Hi, Kareem. Welcome.
Okay.
Yeah, but the Zoom can't. Yeah, see the two Casa Grande logos? They're both muted. One of them has to be unmuted.
Leslie, the screen that says Kareem is actually Mike Henderson.
Oh, hey, Mike, how are you?
I'm trying to
I'm
get
good.
Now,
And who's CLP Doty's iPhone? Who are you? Hi, welcome.
all right, can you guys hear me now?
Yes, hi, Mayor.
Okay.
Yes.
That was the problem. Okay, you all ready?
We're just going to let CLP Doty, who are,
Hi. Leslie,
yeah.
it's Cindy Paddock.
Hi, Cindy. Nice to
How
hear
are you?
Good. Okay.
Leslie, are we ready to go?
All yours, Mayor.
All right, well then let's kick this off. Good evening, everyone. This is Mayor Craig McFarland from the City of Casa Grande, and I want to welcome everybody to our open meeting for the 2030 General Plan. This is an opportunity for you all to see what the general plan looks like, and I just want to emphasize how important it is for the City of Casa Grande. The general plan really is a document that will guide our land use primarily for the City of Casa Grande, and it is for the future. It will go out to 2030. It is required by state law that every 10 years we do an update of the general plan. We're just finishing up the 2020 plan, and this is your 2030 plan. So keeping that in mind and listening to the presentations today, we'll have this open to the public for comment until November 1st. You can do that online at casagrandeaz.gov, and then just look for the logo, which you see on the screen is that Growing Horizon logo. You'll see it on the main website. You can just click on that, and then you can either download it for printing purposes if you like to read paper, or you can actually go online and make comments as you read through the document. So once that's completed, then the Planning and Zoning Department will, or Planning and Zoning Commission will review it and have 2 more public hearings. And then finally, another public hearing with the City Council, which would then, we will put it on a ballot for vote on May 18th of 2021. So that being said, let's get the show on the road, and we'll start to move into the general plan. So please, if you have questions, and I think somebody can lay out some game plans. If you want to ask questions, you can put it in the chat room. Is that right? Is that how we're going to do it? Okay. So, and then I'm going to hand it off to Christiane.
Yes. Thank you, Mayor.
It's all you.
Awesome. So hi, everyone. My name is Christiane Quintans. I'm with the consultant team at Planet. And before we begin, we just want to quickly go over the meeting format so we're all on the same page. And as you may have already noticed, all the microphones have been muted by the host. So if you have any questions, they'll be answered at the end with the Q&A section. Next. However, throughout the presentation, we highly encourage anyone watching, whether through Zoom, Facebook, or YouTube, to feel free to type in your questions or comments into the chat or comment section. We do want to point out, if you want to participate verbally or through audio, Zoom is the only platform to do so, so you will have to use that platform. And I'll go over through how that will work, or how that will look like with the raise hand functions in just a second. So I know by now a lot of you have already probably been familiar with Zoom, but just in case there's anyone here who is not, we'll be going over how to ask questions and so forth. So in the next few slides. And hopefully by now you all can hear me. In case anyone may be having issues logging in or connecting, we just wanted to point out that should you be disconnected, you can join through audio in the bottom left-hand corner. And if you need to use your phone, you can dial in through the phone call tab in the gray box as you see on the left. And I'll give you the number to call in. Otherwise, you can click computer audio and join in directly with the device that you're using and test the speaker and microphone right underneath the blue button. Next. And some other things that we also just wanted to point out is if you're using Zoom in the left-hand bottom corner, there's just a few options to toggle on and off your microphone and your camera. And should you want to have a different background, the virtual background option is available through the arrow right next to the camera sign. So drawing attention just to the second middle area at the bottom of icons. If you do want to see who's attending the meeting or just see who's speaking, you can click the list of participants and it'll open up the participants panel that you see on the right-hand side. And then right next to that is a chat function. So as we are in presentation mode, if you for whatever reason have lost your chat box, just feel free to click on that message icon. It'll open up the chat dialog, and then you can type in your message right at the bottom underneath the who everyone type message here in the bottom right hand corner. Just type in your message and it will be recorded and we can all then see it. Thanks. Some other functions that we just really wanted to quickly highlight is that there are reactions that you can take advantage of, but more importantly, there is the raise hand function. So in the participants panel, if you look at the bottom right hand corner next to the mute button, it does say raise hand. And so this will allow the moderators to be notified that you would like to speak, especially at the end of the Q&A section, where we'll be answering questions and allowing people to speak. So for whatever reason, if you need to leave the meeting, you can go ahead and do so on the bottom right-hand corner. And with that, I will go ahead and pass it off onto Paul and get started.
Christiane, this is Jackie.
Mm-hmm.
And I do not have a raised hand symbol on my Zoom page.
So on the bottom, if you don't mind going back to the slide with the participants, if you open up that panel, it should say invite new on the bottom of the list, and then right next to it on the right-hand corner is the raise hand function.
Okay, thank you for that. Appreciate it.
No, I appreciate the question. All right, thank you. So now with that, we can go ahead and proceed, and I'll hand it over to Paul.
Thank you, Christian. So welcome everybody to our public online event for the 2030 General Plan for Casa Grande. My name is Paul Tice. I'm the Planning and Development Director, and been functioning as the project lead for this plan for the past 9 months or so. And so we're happy to share with the public our draft plan that is formally going under public review. That public review started in September 1st and will run through November 1st. So the purpose of tonight's meeting is really just to provide the public with some information regarding the general plan, listen to any comments or input that you might have regarding the plan, and answer any questions that we could regarding the plan contents. So for those of you who are not familiar with the general plan, it is a guideline for the city's future growth. Under state statute, communities are required to do a general plan once every 10 years. The Casa Grande plan, which we know as the 2020 plan, was adopted by the council and by a public vote in 2009. So it's time to update the 2020 plan to become a 2030 plan. The state statutes do outline what the minimum requirements are for a general plan, including the contents or elements that must be covered by the plan. And in a minute, I'm going to show you those elements, but we've covered all the mandatory statutory elements, as well as added a couple optional elements that were important to the community. The other thing I'd like to note here is that the plan, even though it's a 10-year plan, it does have the ability to be amended one of two ways. Major amendments, which are defined by the plan itself, are allowed to be considered once a year, once every calendar year, by the Planning Commission and City Council, and minor amendments are lesser amendments that are also defined by the plan, and they can be considered at any point in conjunction with rezoning request. Let's see here. The PowerPoint seems to be froze, so give me a second to see why the plan's not progressing.
Hey, Paul, you can use the arrows. There you go.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. Okay, so a little bit about the process that we have used in updating this plan. As I mentioned, we've been working on it for a little over a year. Actually, the first step was to kick off the process with City Council adopting a public participation plan that set forth the stakeholder process that we were going to use during this plan process, and that happened back in May of 2019. We were able to hold a large community meeting in January of this year, just before the COVID restrictions came into place. So luckily, we were able to get a lot of public participation at our kickoff meeting. The Planning Commission has been briefed on this plan at 2 different times, once in February, and then again just recently last month. City Council was also briefed on the plan in March, and again just last night. We presented the plan to the Youth Commission meeting. We created a general plan website early on in the process where we could post all the information on the plan as it was being developed. We also created a technical advisory committee to help direct the plan, especially provide a lot of technical information and data. And that committee met 11 times through the preparation of the plan. And we also created a steering forum that helped direct the policy direction for the plan. A little bit more about the Technical Advisory Committee. It did have representatives from every city department, as well as a lot of different agencies and other governmental entities that are involved in growth and development in Casa Grande. You can see some of the logos for those entities over on the right-hand column. The steering forum, which was the policy direction group, was appointed by the mayor and city council to represent a wide range of stakeholders, community interest, and you can see some of those entities listed on the screen. Both of these groups were critical in informing the plan and helping set its direction and contents. In a second, I'm going to show you all of the different elements that the state statute requires a general plan to contain, but one of the primary elements is known as the land use element. That's the element that most people, when they're using a comprehensive plan, a general plan, rely on. The land use element creates various land use categories that you can see listed on the screen, and all property in the city is placed within one of those land use categories. The new general plan created two different land use categories that did not exist in our 2020 general plan. That is the downtown land use category and the rural category. The rural category actually existed as rural and agricultural. It was consolidated into one. The land use element contains a land use map, discussion on how we could accommodate growth over the next 30 years, and also a section on the annexations that the city should consider as we move into the future. This slide shows the actual land use map and the properties that are classified. I just want to remind the viewers that this is not a zoning map, it's a general land use map. And in each one of these land use categories, there are various zoning districts that the property could be zoned into. For example, the purple, which is our manufacturing and industry land use category, could have both light industrial zoning, heavy industrial zoning, or actually even a hybrid commercial industrial zoning. Excuse me. So the general plan is not zoning. It does, however, all zoning decisions by planning commission and city council have to be consistent with the general plan, including this land use map. This slide shows, excuse me, I'm going to take a drink here for a second. Thank you. This slide actually shows all of the elements of the general plan. I mentioned that these are all required statutorily by Arizona law, with the exception of the economic development element and the historic preservation element. Those are actually optional elements that we've added because they're important to Casa Grande. Both of those elements were included in the 2020 plan as well. This evening, through our different presentations, we are going to be hitting on some of the highlights of the contents of some of these elements. This general plan is broken down into three general themes. The growing economy kind of represents the branding of the plan, I'd say, which is the growing horizon. And you can see underneath the growing economy theme, we have three land use elements. We also have enhancing quality of life with a number of land use elements, and we're actually going to talk about those first this evening. And then lastly, we have environmental sustainability with three elements that really relate to environmental sustainability issues, including water resources, which again is one of the foundations of this new general plan. Early on in the process, as we talked with our steering forum and our technical advisory committee and with planning commission and city council about what changes really need to be made between our 2020 plan and our 2030 plan, there was a consensus that the 2020 plan was really a pretty solid planning document. It was moving the city in the desired direction, but that we probably needed to revise it a little bit to better address some emerging community issues. And those are on the screen. Those are issues that have kind of become to the forefront since the 2020 plan was adopted. including limited water resources to support growth and development, desire to promote infill of vacant land that can be easily served by infrastructure and city services, the need to expand housing choices to accommodate all income levels and demographics, the desire to bring new activity and development into the downtown area, and to drive growth through the creation of new quality commercial industrial development and well-paying jobs. Those community issues morphed into some guiding founding principles that supported the development of the plan and informed the content of the plan. So you can see on the screen some founding principles that we developed and used to build the plan upon. So I'm not going to read those, but those are super, really important founding principles. So we have 11 of those. We'll talk about those a little bit more as we go through this presentation and how they relate to specific contents of the plan. If I was to characterize the major changes between the 2020 and 2030 plans, I would say that we've included an evaluation of growth projections to water resource availability. We've actually tried to do a good job of linking those two concepts. Whoops, excuse me. We created a new downtown land use category in an effort to facilitate downtown development. We've provided additional opportunity for middle density housing in the neighborhood land use category to improve housing choices. We've combined the rural and agricultural land use categories into one. We've expanded the amount of land in the manufacturing and industrial land use categories, and we have consolidated the growth areas from 4 to 2. This slide shows you and these pie charts gives you an idea of how much of our land in the city, how much acreage actually falls into one of the each of the land use categories. First off, the first thing that strikes me on this pie chart is that the vast majority of our property is still classified as neighborhoods. Neighborhoods land use category includes primarily single-family detached housing, also some opportunity for medium-density housing, some opportunity for higher density housing, and some opportunity for neighborhood level commercial, but predominantly it's single-family detached homes. You can see the other categories, the amount of land did not really change significantly in terms of its percentage. You might note that we did introduce a downtown land use category for 2030. I mentioned that, but it's a very small amount of acreage and compared to the rest of the community. Also note that rural was increased from 4% in the 2020 plan to 7% in the 2030 plan, and that was as a result of modifying our growth area boundaries. So we'll talk a little bit about those elements that are focused on enhancing the quality of life of the residents within the community. The first was implementing this guiding principle to increase the range of housing choices and products available to all sectors of the Casa Grande community. That was something that we heard pretty loud and clear from City Council and the public, that was something that we really needed to increase housing choices in the community. As a result of that, the plan includes a number of goals to achieve that principle. We are providing, the goal is to provide a variety of housing choices for all income levels, generations, household demographics, to encourage variety in neighborhood design and development patterns, to encourage higher density residential projects in the areas designated downtown, community corridor, and commerce and business, to promote use-to-use compatibility when approving new developments adjacent to existing residential areas. That was a really important goal because in many instances, this plan is promoting mixed uses versus segregating uses. And when you mix uses, you still have to pay special attention to making sure you have good use-to-use compatibility. So there is an emphasis on that within the plan itself. There's also a goal to increase the supply of affordable or attainable housing to increase home ownership opportunities for low-income residents, and to strive to meet the needs of senior citizens and other special needs populations. So in an effort to achieve those goals and implement those founding principles and guidelines, we did modify the neighborhood land use category to allow the development of medium-density housing, which is defined as 10 dwelling units per acre maximum, as well as the higher-density housing, which is 20 dwelling units per acre max. The current plan only allowed higher-density housing in the neighborhoods. It did not have a special category for the medium-density housing, or the missing middle, as planners like to refer to it sometimes. So we expanded the opportunity for medium-density housing. We did limit it in the neighborhoods area to a maximum site size of 25 acres, and limited the amount of medium and high-density residential development in the neighborhoods area to 20% of the land use category. There's still the opportunity to do some neighborhood commercial, but predominantly the neighborhoods category will remain a single-family detached. The graphics, the photos at the bottom of the slide kind of represent those three housing types of single-family detached, the medium density or middle density in the middle, and the higher density on the right side. In Casa Grande today, about 85% of the housing dwellings are single-family detached, like the photo on the left, and about the other 15% is made up of apartments and manufactured home parks. We really have little of the medium-density housing that you see, the townhome designs, the condo designs, and so we're really trying to emphasize that as an alternative housing choice. The other efforts that the plan makes to try to increase housing choices is to allow higher density housing in our downtown area. And primarily it's attached dwelling units, whether they're apartments or mixed use with commercial on the ground floor and residential on the upper floors, but a higher density housing is allowed in the downtown area. We think that's important to reinvigorate, to make the downtown a more viable and lively place. Also, we allowed residential housing in the community corridor land use category. That's kind of a mixed-use urban node kind of category with a density of 25 DUs per acre, and also even allowed some residential uses in our commerce and business land use area to allow some mixed use to happen in that category as well, even at a higher density. We had a redevelopment element with the guiding principle to improve neighborhood appearance, living conditions, and overall quality of life in the city's older neighborhoods through the preservation and revitalization of residential and commercial areas. So redevelopment is an important aspect of city development and general plan process. So we did develop a series of goals related and action steps related to redevelopment, including continue the city's efforts to rehabilitate housing and replace substandard housing in primarily our low to moderate income neighborhoods, to maintain affordable housing and promote income diversity in older neighborhoods as revitalization projects take place, and to revitalize commercial development in older neighborhoods. So the photos on the bottom, the one on the right shows an excellent recent example of a redevelopment, adaptive reuse in a historic building in our downtown area. And then the photo on the left shows another potential redevelopment opportunity for a city-owned building that's also historic and in the downtown area. We created a series of neighborhood strategic areas, all of which have low to moderate income household characteristics. You can see those on the screen. We added a newly created area on Florence Boulevard that extends to the east of the downtown area, and a little bit to pick up the Casa Grande Mall and some other commercial buildings that could be benefit from redevelopment, as well as mapped our opportunity zones as they offer tax credits, federally approved tax credits for redevelopment and new development activity. Another guiding principle was to create a sense of arrival at our entryways, to create a unique sense of place throughout the community. We did that primarily through classifying property at our major entryways into the community corridor land use category, which is a land use classification that allows a lot of mixing of land use and create kind of a little urban development node, if you will, as to create a sense of arrival and a sense of place. You can see the goals that we have developed under the community corridor area to try to implement that vision. We also included a multimodal transportation element. So the guiding principle there was really to foster a land use pattern that can be served by a variety of transportation modes, not just vehicles such as walking, bicycling, mass transit, and autonomous vehicles. What we'd like to do, what the plan suggests we do, is create transportation choices for our population, just like housing choices, because to provide opportunity for transportation through biking, walking, autonomous vehicles, mass transit, as well as vehicles themselves. This slide shows our planned roadway network for our major road corridors and the expansion and extension of our arterial network to serve the future growth and development in the area. We also included the transit plan as part of the transportation element. We believe that transit is an important alternative transportation mode that needs to be considered and implemented and integrated into our land use planning effort. So you can see our transit plan that's been recently approved by City Council, as well as our trails and bicycle network that we are trying to implement. This is essentially the same trails and bicycle network and plan that was in our 2020 plan. It's been updated to show those linkages that we have been able to construct over the last 10 years, but shows that we have a lot of work to do to continue implementing a trails and bicycle network in the community. And I know we have a lot of focus on trying to achieve that over the next near future. So this kind of wraps up the quality of life element. I'm just going to quickly review those next steps, and then we're going to open it up for any questions or comments that those listening might have. So tonight we're at the public event, and so after we hear the public input this evening and any comments you might have, we're going to be re-looking at the draft plan, making revisions to accommodate those comments and input that we receive, and then take that revised plan to the Planning Commission to hold a public hearing on November 19th. The state law requires the Planning Commission hold 2 public hearings, the first of which is going to be on November 19th, and the second of which is going to be on December 3rd. After the public hearing on December 3rd, the Planning Commission will forward a recommendation on the plan to City Council to either adopt it or not adopt it or to revise it. City Council will also hold their own public hearing on the plan on December 21st and take public input at that time. And then on January 4th, the council is scheduled to vote on adopt the plan. And if it is adopted, to schedule it for a public vote for May 18th, 2021, which would be a special election, mail-in ballot type of election. So with that, we're going to turn it over to hear any comments or questions that the public may have coming in from either Zoom, YouTube, or Facebook Live. Thank you.
So Paul, would you like people to just jump in, or do you have a format?
I think if they're on Zoom, they're supposed to raise their hand, and I think Joe or Christian will acknowledge them, and then if they're on Facebook Live or YouTube, they're supposed to write chat, and somebody's going to read me their chat questions.
So Paul, you want to see right now if somebody has any comment from YouTube or Facebook, and then we'll jump into the Zoom.
Okay, sounds good. Can we do that? Okay, I hear that we have nothing coming in from Facebook nor from YouTube. So we'll now take anything that we have from anyone on Zoom.
Jen, did you have something specific? We'll go ahead and start with you.
I do. Thank you very much. My name is Jen Ruby. I work for Walton International. We own several projects in Casa Grande, and I just really appreciate all the effort staff and all of the volunteers have put into this. I think there's some amazing stuff in the new general plan. The flexibility, the shifting of standards that Paul walked us through it's great. A lot of good work here. I have provided this comment previously, so I won't get into too much detail for you, but I do have some concerns in areas where you have approved PADs with existing approved zoning. We have a couple of those projects where the underlying general plan category is no longer consistent or in compliance with those PADs. I think that might not be the best path moving forward. It puts an applicant or a landowner in a tough position where if we ever did need to make some minor changes or some changes to that PAD zoning, that we would be forced to go through a major general plan amendment, which I also probably don't think isn't what the city wants, given that you've worked so hard on this general plan to turn around and see major general plan amendments come in soon after. Probably isn't a great direction for everybody. Again, staff has my specific comments on this, but my projects would be Southern Trails and Vista Ranch. Those are the two areas where we've got significantly more commerce and business than is shown in our PADs and probably more than makes sense from a market standpoint. So thank you very much for the opportunity to comment and for all of your hard work.
So if I might respond to that, Jen. Thank you for those comments. First off, I'm going to tell you that as a result of receiving your comments, we realized that you were making a very good point. And so what we've done is we've gone in to look at all of the PADs that have subdivisions, preliminary plats, and final plats that actually have certificates of assured water supply to make sure that we had not put those areas into a land use category that would prevent barriers to those projects being constructed to implement their certificates of assured water supply. So we took that to heart. We went in and not only in your case, but in many others, we refined the mapping to take many of those out of the commerce and business area because they were adjacent to the interstate, but to put them back into the neighborhoods category to allow them to be able to fully implement their certificates of assured water supply. We actually also looked at a few other PADs that didn't necessarily have certificates of assured water supply, but did have zoning for commercial and residential areas, and we tweaked the land use categories to better align with their existing PAD zoning as well. So we're compiling a list of all those changes, and we're going to publish that on our website and present that to the steering forum to let everyone know what kind of adjustments we've made to the land use plan to address that very concern.
I have a comment coming in for you, Paul, from Facebook Live. This comment is from Steve Teat. Forgive me if I mispronounced your name, but he just has a comment that says, "Great job on this plan, Paul."
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that.
Paul, can you hear me? I wasn't sure whether you had to unmute me. I guess I unmuted myself. Should I go ahead?
Go ahead, John. We can hear you.
Okay. So just to piggyback on what Jennifer said, I know you're going to present it to the steering forum in mass later, but based on what you've seen so far, are these pretty precision changes that you've made? I mean, because we were pretty firm on wanting, commerce and business along the freeway corridor, et cetera. A lot of discussions on those. I'm curious to whether these slight PAD changes you made large changes to that, or were they pretty precision cuts? Thank you.
Thanks for that question, John. I would classify those changes to the land use plan as precision. The land immediately adjacent to the interstate is still generally classified as commerce and business because there are a lot of challenges to putting residential use next to the interstate with the adverse impact from the interstate noise and other, air pollution and other environmental factors. So in general, the land adjacent to the interstate is still commerce and business, but it doesn't go as far to the west. It's not as deep. We've allowed some residential to come back to there's like a frontage road that follows the interstate north-south, Camino Mercado. And so we followed essentially the Camino Mercado alignment and split the land use to the east of Camino Mercado between that and the interstate commerce and business, and to the west of it into our neighborhoods category.
Great,
Hey,
thank
Paul,
you. I look forward to seeing it.
Hey, Paul, if I could add too, that I believe we did it based on the PAD zoning as well. So what's commercial is still up against the highway.
That's exactly right. Yes. Do we have any other?
Thank you very much to both. I'll look at it in more detail later, but just want to make sure we hadn't made some major swath of change or something.
John, if you stop by the office, I'd be happy to walk you through exactly all those changes that we've made so you get a good perspective.
Thank you very much, sir.
Steve?
All right, Paul, we've got Jackie. Jackie's got a question.
Okay, Jackie. Does somebody have Jackie muted?
Okay, I'm good. So just to refresh my memory, Paul, are we allowing high density in that business category that's along the freeway?
Could you repeat the question, Jackie?
Are we allowing higher density residential in that business industrial category along the freeway?
Yes, we are. We're allowing it up to 40 dwelling units per acre within our commerce and business. Okay. So you're right. You can still do multifamily along that interstate, so it won't just be all commercial. There will be some mixed uses going on along that corridor.
Okay, good. I think that was important, and I wanted to make that point known, so thank you.
You're welcome.
I think we just covered it, but just in case, we have a comment from Steve Teat. Can we mention the Interstate 11?
Steve, that's a good question. I'm just going to take you to this transportation corridor map for a second. So this is our transportation corridor map for our major roadways, and actually I-11 is not on this map. We did discuss whether or not we should include I-11, and the decision by the steering forum and the technical advisory committee was not to do so, simply because ADOT has still not formalized the I-11 alignment through Casa Grande. They're looking at a couple alternatives. Casa Grande is essentially advocating for the Montgomery Road alignment to be used primarily for the I-11, and ADOT is taking that under consideration. Right now, they have there are another I-11 corridor that sort of cuts through our industrial area, including right through the corner of Lucid property, and so we're a little concerned about that particular alignment. So we did not include it because we're still in discussions with ADOT on what the proper location for that alignment should be through Casa Grande. All right, do we have any other comments or questions out there that we need to address this evening on this particular theme? Okay, looks like our next session is, we would normally start at 6:30, so I guess we'll take a short little break and come back at 6:30 with our next theme. You can certainly stay on if you're on Zoom, and we'll be starting again at 6:30 with our next section presentation.
We have some new people on, so all right, then I'll just do the second part of our meeting today. Just to remind everybody, this is for the 2030 Casa Grande General Plan update. And I believe that Leslie's going to be doing the next section, giving Mr. Tice a break. Just to also reemphasize the importance of the general plan, and the purpose of this is to really get community input and to get this information out to you so that you can review it and you have an opportunity, because this is your plan. It is the plan for the next 10 years for the city of Casa Grande. It deals with land use. It is not a zoning tool, but it is a land use tool that the city uses in terms of determining our growth and where we go with the land use. So that being said, then I'm going to hand it off to Leslie, and you're on.
Thank you, Mayor. Just before I start, Latanya, do we have more people, or do you know if we've got different people, either on Facebook Live or YouTube?
It's a little bit difficult to tell, but the number is oscillating. So we'll just go ahead and keep moving forward. I think it's about the same people.
Okay, just for those of you that may have just joined, so you know, if you're on Zoom, we can get your comments via audio, but if you're watching through Zoom, Facebook Live or YouTube, please use your chat buttons and we'll capture your comments in the chat at the end of the presentation. This is the second of 3 presentations on the general plan, and this presentation focuses on enhancing the quality of life. And there's a variety of general plan elements that are addressed in this particular theme. It's one of 3 themes for the general plan. And the first one is the growing economy. That's our theme for today. So the first theme that we're going to focus on is the downtown. If you participated in the last session, you'll remember that there's a new land use category for the downtown. And one of the principles that is guiding the general plan is that we want to encourage new development in the city's downtown. And a lot of the goals and strategies for this were developed from the Urban Land Institute Technical Assistance Panel that was held on the downtown and identified a lot of opportunities for it. So the next slide. Some of the goals in this plan to move that principle forward is to begin to really focus on residential development, to provide more of an urban living choice, a little bit higher density development, recognizing that there are some real drainage issues in the downtown, and recognizing that those need to get addressed as part of redevelopment. And then also looking at street design, a kind of people first, a very pedestrian focused street design that really encourages a more walkable downtown, and doing this all while recognizing and conserving and preserving the wonderful historic assets that really tie downtown to the history and the culture of the city. Next slide. So how this comes out in the land use map and in the general plan land use strategies are the creation of a new downtown land use category, which we talked about, which does allow higher densities and looks at development a little bit differently. But another thing that's happened is that with this new downtown land use category, you'll see that the downtown has been extended on the north side to Florence Boulevard, so that will include the existing City Hall, for example, the auditorium building, and help create some more connectivity across Florence Boulevard, which was something that was talked about in community meetings and by the steering committee and the TAC. Also, the downtown area was sort of increased, so to speak, to go on the other side of the tracks to allow some of the vacant land to encourage new development. And that could be some commercial development or residential development as well. Another principle of the plan is to honor and preserve the agricultural heritage of Casa Grande, and this is really important to the community. It's a prevailing theme throughout your history, through the prior general plan, through this general plan, I think even through the general plan before it. But it also recognizes that development is going to occur, and so we want that development to occur in the right places. So some of the goals to ensure that Casa Grande preserves and conserves its rural history are to, one, conserve those rural landscapes. And so, for example, there's a rural area on the north part of Casa Grande to the west of I-10, that kind of lower density development, making sure that some of the city's unique historic and natural features continue to get preserved and continue to connect you to that history and culture. And then probably one of the bigger things are just making sure that people are able to continue to farm, and that in rural areas, the type of commercial that develops is appropriate to that area. Some of the other rural preservation goals are to look at annexations, and then also probably one of the more important changes from the old plan to this new plan is in the rural land use category, allowing industrial scale solar. You see an example of that as one of the pictures. And then another change from the older plan to this plan was to combine the rural and agricultural land use categories. So you'll see a lot of the goals also talk about agriculture as well as preserving that very rural, low density tribal type of land use. And I just talked about that. Sorry, I kind of jumped the gun on myself. But here's some examples of the types of development that you might see in rural areas. One of the things I want to point out is that, you know, the general plan has two land areas that it looks at. One is the city limits, and then the other is what's called the planning area. And the planning area is where there's room to grow and where to expand. And we'll be talking a little bit about that in the industrial category as well. When you look at Casa Grande, the city itself, within the city limits, rural land use category, the rural land use category is only 7% of the land. But when you include the planning area, which is really the long-term growth of the city, right now, 46% of the land is designated for rural types of development. So really what this recognizes is that the developed part of Casa Grande will continue to develop, as that goal said, but there are areas on the periphery of Casa Grande and the fringe that are part of its planning area that we recognize as rural, and we want to make sure that we look at them and conserve them properly so that we make sure that the history and the culture of the community is celebrated. Next. One of the principles focuses on high quality jobs in a variety of types of economic activities. And you know, Casa Grande is a leader in the region, an economic leader in the region, and this plan envisions and includes goals and strategies to make sure that it stays that into the future. So this element was prepared with a lot of input, and I believe by the Economic Development Department of the city, but also a lot of input from the steering committee and a lot of comments from community members at the community meetings. But one of the things that the city recognized when we did some growth projections was that there wasn't enough land in the existing general plan to capture, well, you can go back to, sorry, to capture all of the industrial development that was projected to occur. And so what this general plan does is it expands the existing industrial areas a little bit into that planning area outside of the city limits to ensure that there is room for growth for business and employment within the city. There are also goals that talk about maintaining the city as a leader in employment and development. Thanks, Paul. I know I'm kind of jumping around. I'm sort of doing this more from memory. Making sure that the design of new business parks and new industry is appropriate to the location and its context, and making sure that that the city continues to stay a regional center within the county. I think we can probably go on. Another component of the plan is infill, and this general plan includes some higher density development in some of the land use categories to allow for infill. But infill is really important. It's the most economic type of development the city can pursue. It's development where the city's already got services and infrastructure to support it. So we're not really worrying about extending those services into what's undeveloped areas to support development. There's a lot of other kinds of benefits associated with infill. Typically, it's a little bit at a higher density. It supports missing middle housing, so it begins to address some of those other more diverse needs. So some of the goals and the plan to promote infill are to, one, encourage infill sites, directing growth to areas that use the most suitable, efficient, and cost-effective use of infrastructure. Part of this includes water certificates, and Paul's talked a little bit about that in the water element. And then one of the bigger strategies, and this got a lot of support and comment when we presented the plan at the council, when Paul presented it at the council study session last night, was to consider revising some of the impact fees to make infill development more attractive and more cost effective. One of the other principles of the plan is to make sure that we manage growth, that it's concurrent with the infrastructure that we need to support it, and then also that we can provide services for it. Next. So one of the things that this plan does is it takes the 4 growth areas from the older plan, combines them into 2. You saw that on the prior slide. But what it also does is coordinates growth with, so you'll see that most of the growth areas are within the existing incorporated limits of the city. You'll also notice at the next slide that that growth area overlays where the certificates of assured water supply are. And we've also identified those areas for where it's appropriate residential growth. So we're recognizing that growth is going to occur where water is available. And that's a really important component of this plan, is tying growth to that particular piece of infrastructure or service. So that kind of covers those principles. Some of the next steps of the plan, I guess everybody's seen them. So are there any questions? Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome. So do we have any questions coming in from Facebook Live or YouTube? Any chat questions?
None at this time.
And how about on Zoom? Anyone on Zoom wish to ask questions or provide us with some input? How about on Zoom? Anyone on Zoom wish to ask questions or provide us with some input?
Yes, I have a question.
How about on Zoom? Anyone on Zoom wish to ask questions or provide us with some input?
Yes, I have a question.
Go ahead, John.
Yes, when it comes to infill, is there a certificate problem when it comes to getting water rights for that land, or is it already grandfathered in?
So there is land. Oh, go ahead, Paul. You're better at this than I am.
When it comes to getting water rights for that land, or is it?
Paul, do you want to answer that?
Sure, I'll answer, but can we repeat the question, please? It was a little garbled on this end.
John, do you want to unmute yourself and repeat the question?
Yes, my question was with the infill proposal with the lands in town for residential use, is there a certificate problem with those lands, or is that water rights grandfathered in? The lands in town for residential use, is there a certificate?
Thank you, John. Paul, did you get that?
Lands in town for residential use, is there a certificate?
So someone needs to mute a mic so we don't get it repeated. I will answer the question. Joe, can you mute the correct mic?
Yeah, you're all set.
Thank you. So the question is whether or not on these infill sites, whether or not we have a certificate of assured water supply issue. with single-family development on those? And the answer would be yes. So the infill that we're probably looking for on most of these sites is going to be middle-density housing, some type of lower, density garden apartments, townhomes, things that will be rental. Could be some pockets of higher density residential as well, or low-level commercial that's compatible. But it is, unless there's an existing home on the site that gets demolished, in that case, it could be rebuilt without a certificate of assured water supply. But many of these small infill sites do not have certificates of assured water supply.
And to just add to that, the single-family neighborhoods area that are designated largely, am I correct, Paul, do reflect a lot of the areas that are designated for neighborhood include those areas that also do have certificates of assured water supply.
Yeah, a little
So new development.
a clarification
Go ahead.
maybe maybe a quick clarification on that point is that under the ADWR, Arizona Department of Water Resources rules, if you have a subdivision that was created pre-Pinal County Active Management Area, which is like pre-1985, then those are subdivisions that do not need cause. So if we have vacant infill sites that have been previously platted as residential lots, they can be built on without cause, which there are a number of those as well. So, my statement about you can't build residential if you don't have cause only is for those that have not been previously platted into residential lots.
I'll also add real quick that if it's a larger lot, you wouldn't be able to subdivide it to get that cause at this time.
Well, that's another good point, I guess, is that under the cause rules, you can subdivide to create a lot that a subdivision with 5 or less lots without cause. So there is some opportunity, I think, to make some small subdivisions that are exempt from the cause rules. So I guess there are more opportunities than I originally thought to maybe build some residential on some of these infill sites.
All right, Paul, we also have a question coming in from Jackie. So I'll mute.
So Paul, can't we also say that in the inner part of the city where we have vacant lots, which could be considered infill, if the Arizona Water Company already has water rights, those lots do not need to have cause. They already have access to water.
That's right, Jackie. If you have an existing platted lot that was created pre the AMA requirements, it is exempt from having to have cause, and it can just be serviced by Arizona Water. That is exactly right.
Was there any other questions?
Okay, if there's no more questions, since we're not getting many different participants in our event here, I'm inclined just to go on to the next section and instead of taking a big break. And if there's others who join us, I can recap for them if need be. So if that's okay with everyone, we're just going to go into our next theme. So our next theme that we're going to cover really is the environmental and sustainability theme. So I'm going to just scroll down to that real quickly. That will consist of water resources, environmental planning, conservation, and energy. And we're going to start with a discussion on linking land use to water resources. The guiding principle here is to link all land use decisions to the known available water resources to ensure the long-term viability and sustainability for all new growth and development. Looks like the mayor wants to join us here, so I just let him in. The state statute on general plans require us to include a water resource element, and more specifically requires our element to address three primary issues. The first is for us to identify the known legally and physically available surface water, groundwater, and effluent supplies that we might have. Two is for us to project how much water we might need to support our future growth projections. And third, to look at any difference, any deficit between what we need to support growth and what we have available to meet that need. So this element looks at evaluating those three questions. And although the prior 2020 plan really did not have a water resource element, this is a new section for our general plan, and I'm going to say that it's really one of the founding principles for the plan, that to really look very seriously and closely at how much water resource we have and how we can, whether or not we have adequate water resource to supply our future growth projections. In order to do that, we first started to look at how much water that we've been using as a community over the last 10 years. Arizona Water Company, who's the primary water provider for Casa Grande, was kind enough to provide us with that data. And as you can see from the chart, the Casa Grande has used about 15,000 acre feet of water per year, each year over the last 10 years. I thought that was a pretty interesting piece of data given the fact that our population growth has increased 12% over that same time period. So I would have assumed to see the water usage increase approximately 12% as well, but that's not the case. It actually stayed very constant over that decade. That led me to the assumption that that could only occur if we were conserving water, increase conservation over each of these years as the population increased. Both in our single-family usages and our business and in our industrial uses, our per capita and per business use was decreasing since the rate of usage did not go up. So that's good news. Part of the plan looks at trying to continue that trend and actually even give a more emphasis to water conservation in the future. So this bar chart shows us if the population is to double over the next 30 years, which is what our population projection is essentially a doubling of the population over the next 30 years, that the water usage would logically also double. So it would go from 15,000 acre feet a year to about 30,000 acre feet, just to understand how much water we might be using. We also looked at if we imposed a goal of trying to reduce water consumption by 15%, what that would do. You can see the blue charts that shows us how much we could reduce our annual consumption with a conservation goal of 15%, which is what we're going to try to achieve. We also want to take a look at housing unit demand and housing unit growth over the next 30 years to understand how much water consumption or water resource we would need to support our new dwelling units. So with a population growth of basically doubling from 57,000 to 118,000, and by the way, those numbers, we had three population projection sources. We had the State Demographer's Office, we had the series of data developed by the City Planning Office, as well as a series of data produced by the Maricopa Area Council of Governments. All three projections were essentially the same. And so we used the state demographer numbers here. But we think those are pretty valid numbers in terms of the growth rate that we can assume that we're going to achieve over the next 30 years. So you can see the number of dwelling units are essentially going to double with the doubling of the population. So we're going to have about 60,000 new residents over the next 30 years, and we're going to add about 22,000 new dwelling units over the next 30 years to meet that growth demand. To better understand whether or not we have enough water to serve those new dwelling units, we first looked at what we thought would be the types of units that would be constructed to meet that demand. The numbers that we arrived on was traditional single-family detached would constitute about 70% of the construction to meet the demand. Apartments, condos, townhomes would be another 15%, and manufactured homes would be the last 15%. I'm going to say that today, the single-family detached construction is providing about 85% of the supply, with the other 15% made up of by manufactured homes and apartments. We assume that that trend will be modified slightly, and we'll have a less percentage of dwelling units for single-family homes and a greater percentage in the apartments, condos, and townhomes as we expand our housing choices. But assuming we're going to have 70% single-family detached homes to meet our dwelling unit demand, that means we're going to need to construct about 15,500 new single-family homes over the next 30 years. And the remaining dwelling unit need will be made up of by apartments, manufactured homes, condos, townhomes. The reason why we really needed to know how many single-family homes we were going to construct, because each of those single-family homes needs a certificate of assured water supply by Arizona Department of Water Resources. So again, working in collaboration with Arizona Water, we obtained the data from the Arizona Department of Water Resources on all the approved certificates of assured water supply that they've issued, and then we figured out of all the ones that have been issued, which ones have not been yet implemented, i.e. the lot was still vacant. And then we we mapped all of those vacant lots in the community, at least all of those vacant subdivisions. There are probably some small incremental lots spread out here and there, but we mapped all the vacant subdivisions. And you can see from the pie chart that we determined that we have about 21,800 vacant lots with certificates of assured water supply. About a third of those happen to be associated with final plats. So those are in subdivisions where we could issue building permits today. Typically, the subdivision infrastructure is in place or close to being completed with the water, the sewer, the roads, drainage facilities. In fact, we issue building permits every day for vacant lots with calls and final plats. I guess more importantly to look at is that the greatest amount of lots, vacant lots with cause, are in preliminary plats. There's a little over 11,000 of those. They're color-coded on the map in front of you. You can see that the blue are the preliminary plats. So most of our vacant lots are actually in preliminary plats that still have to become approved as a final plat by city council, still have to have the subdivision infrastructure installed, but certainly are in the supply chain to help meet the demand for the single-family subdivisions that might be created. An also important aspect of this data was that we identified that there's around 3,000 units of cause that are associated for condominiums and townhomes that might be built and sold as a for sale versus rental. And those are distributed into various PADs within the community. We've mapped those as well, but we do have about 3,000 vacant condo lots, if you will, that can be constructed and sold to, again, to help provide additional housing choices for our residents. So what this data showed us was that the doubling of the population over the next 30 years and that 15,000 new single-family homes that are needed to meet that growth projection, we actually do have enough vacant lots with approved cause to meet that population growth. So we're confident that we can achieve that population. We can build out those subdivisions, but the future to where we go from there is not as clear as to how we continue to grow once we've exhausted our approved cause vacant lots. That led us to a vision that to ensure that there is adequate water to sustain the city's desired future growth and development, that we needed to think about ways to reduce our reliance on groundwater, ways to invest in sustainable water supplies and bring new water supplies into the community that were sustainable, and to use the water that we have more efficiently, including conservation and our effluent. So we have some very specific water resource goals to implement a water conservation measures to reduce outdoor use of water. The outdoor use of water, specifically with single-family residential landscaping, is one of our really big water using categories. So we need to think about how we might encourage less outdoor use of water, specifically with our landscaping for our residential. Our multifamily and commercial and industrial already are landscaped per a xeriscape, low water using landscape ordinance. So the water usage for those is not as high as it is for the single family homes. We want to reduce the total daily water use per capita and the daily residential water use per capita by 15%. That allows us to achieve those reductions I showed earlier in that bar graph. We want to maximize the use of effluent as an alternative to groundwater in appropriate applications. If you think about it, those 15,000 acre-feet of water that Arizona Water delivers to all our land uses in the city, that 15,000 feet of water ends up being discharged as effluent out of our wastewater treatment plant. And we need to figure out ways to use that effluent in a way that can replace some of our potable water consumption. And lastly, to develop additional water supplies to reduce the dependency on groundwater, which really means bringing in alternative water supplies into the Casa Grande area from other areas of the state. So with that, I'm going to take any questions we may have regarding the environmental sustainability and probably more specifically on the water resource element. So do we have any chat from YouTube or Facebook Live?
Nothing at this time.
Okay, thank you, Latanya. Do we have anyone on Zoom that would like to ask any questions or provide any commentary regarding the water resource element?
There are no questions received in chat so far.
Okay, great. So that concludes our presentation for the evening. Is there any questions or comments that anyone would like to make just in general about the, general comments, generic comments about the general plan that we should be considering?
Hey, Paul, this is Craig. Sorry.
Hi, Mayor.
Can you hear me?
Sure can.
So So I know that there were some comments that were put in there that CAC had entered into our comment section. So I'm assuming that we're looking at some of those, and we may do some, I don't know, revisions, but additions or include some of their thoughts on the plan.
Absolutely, Mayor. We are taking the comments we received by both CAC and from the elementary school district, and we will be revising some of our action steps to reflect their comments.
Okay, great. Thank you, Paul.
So before everyone just jumps off the line, I just want to remind folks that the general plan is up on the website. There's a map where you can drop a pin and comment. Each of the elements are individually listed in tabs, and you can comment on each element, as Paul mentioned, if you read it. The website is cggeneralplan2030.com, or you can find the website by going to the city's webpage and just clicking on the Casa Grande Growing Horizon logo that you see here next to the questions box. I think at this point, Paul, do you want to just stay on till 7:30 and just see if anyone new comes on, and then if not, we can close out?
I just wanted to remind everyone that, correct me if I'm wrong, they're able to go up and download, review, and comment on the plan until November 1st. Is that correct? Is that until 11:59 p.m.?
Sure.
Okay, November 1st. We just want to make sure that people know there's a time constraint.
Yes. Thank you.
In addition to that, LaTanya, that's a great point. In addition to that, they're also welcome. If they're not able to do it on the website or by November 1st, there will be a public hearing on the general plan held by the Planning Commission, and then the City Council will also have a public hearing and a meeting on the plan. So there's lots of opportunities left to comment, and the city really is interested.
Yeah, Leslie, I think actually the Planning and Zoning has 2 public hearings, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
And then there's one for the City Council as well. So yeah, there's a lot of opportunities for everybody to put their 2 cents in, and doing it online I think is actually most expedient, because you can kind of pick the parts of the plan that you might be most interested in, and then if you do it online, you can actually make your comments right online, and you don't have to send anything in. It's pretty slick.
And up on the screen now, you'll see the dates of when those meetings are. Again, the Planning Commission public hearing is November 19th. It'll be at the Community Recreation Center on Peart. Then on December 3rd, there'll be one at the City Council chambers, if I'm not mistaken. And then on December 21st, the City Council in the chambers will have a public hearing, and January 4th, they will take action on the plan. So in addition to the website, in addition to getting a copy of the plan, there are lots of opportunities to comment. We know you guys probably know it, but please spread the word.
I think it'd also be beneficial to mention that that this presentation is going to be posted on our city website, and I believe the general plan website. Is that correct?
Yes, you are correct. Thank you, Joe.
Yeah, and I just want to thank everybody for their participation, and Leslie, all of your hard work and your team's hard work. Also, Paul, to you and your team, Joe, you guys did a great job. So I just wanted to say thank you.
Yeah, Mayor.
And really a shout out to the 2 committees as well. The technical committee and the the
steering
community committee. So thanks to everybody's steering. Thank you, Paul.
Mayor, I've worked on a lot of plans, and this one is truly, truly, truly a citywide effort. Paul did a remarkable job. I mean, really great job of getting every single department involved and encouraging them and having them participate in writing elements, and everyone really stepped up to the plate. So of all of the plans that I've worked on, I think this is one that probably represents a city kind of more than any. It's really not the view of one department being imposed on others. It's really the view of other departments coming together to create one document. So it really is a terrific effort and a real credit to your staff and your community.
Well, thank you for that. I think that's, that's really driven by Paul and his team. So, and our community. I mean, everybody really kind of stepped up. So I'm proud of everybody. So thank you.
Okay, with that, why don't we go ahead and sign off on this meeting, and maybe we can leave some messages up on YouTube or Facebook Live for anyone who's tried to join us after we've signed off with their opportunity to comment. So we'll talk about that with our public information officer here in just a minute. All right, so thanks, everybody. Appreciate your time and your participation and your comments on our